Angels by Michael Shaara. A Confederate spy named Harrison came across a large number of Union troops coming to the north, suspiciously close to the Confederate army. Harrison returns to the Confederate camp and states what he discovered to General Longstreet, who is dubious at first, but eventually believes what Harrison has reported. Longstreet then awakes and notifies General Lee, who is the commander of the Confederate army. General Lee is also skeptical because he had sent General Stuart to keep an eye on the situation with the Union Army and hasn't heard back from him. Longstreet believes that General Stuart is slacking off on his job and pushes Lee to have the army move westward. Lee complies and sends the army to a town named Gettysburg. Meanwhile, south of Gettysburg is Colonel Chamberlain, who is awoken by a man who is demoted to be a private after he had assaulted an officer. He tells Chamberlain that the 20th Maine Regiment has just gained 120 men from the 2nd Maine, for it has been demobilized. Those men are being kept guard of, and Chamberlain has the order to shoot any of those men who do not comply with marching. The men are fed, but voice that they do not want to keep fighting in the war. Chamberlain acknowledges this and gives a thoughtful speech, asking the men to join the regiment, minus 6 men. All of them agree. General Buford, the commander of the Union, and 2 of his units enter Gettysburg, all on horseback. He gazes at the land upon the Union army and surprisingly sees a division of Confederates in Gettysburg not on horseback. Buford decides to stay in Gettysburg and sends a message back to Infantry Commander Reynolds. His message tells Reynolds that he is in Gettysburg and thinks that a bigger Confederate force will appear in the morning. West of Gettysburg is the Confederate camp where officers are teaching a British lieutenant named Fremantle to play the game poker. Longstreet ponders about the battle that will soon occur as one of his aides informs him that a soldier saw a Union unit in Gettysburg. The reporter thinks that the soldier must have seen the state's military, but Longstreet thinks otherwise. Longstreet stays around, chatting about when General Pickett arrives with more officers under his command. Pickett discusses with Longstreet about how his division hasn't had any action and wants to be moved up. Longstreet doesn't allow it, making the point that his division will be leading the fight when it comes to escaping. Longstreet then talks to Armistead about how he would prefer to be a defensive in war tactics. Armistead says it sounds like a safe option, but that General Lee would never agree to it, for it is a shameful way to fight a war. Still at the Confederate camp, west of Gettysburg, General Lee is taking things easy because of health issues relating to his heart. He further discusses the military, observing that General Stuart still hasn't reported back about the Union Army. This leaves Lee in a blind spot. Some of Lee's officers are upset that General Stuart failed to do his job and wanted him to be punished for it, but Lee likes Stuart, so defends his name to General Longstreet. Longstreet discovers that there's a new commander of the Union Army, George Meade. He also believes that the Union has come into Gettysburg and suggests a tactic to force the Union to attack. Lee is irritated by Longstreet's defensive tactics and will not use them. The Confederates begin to attack General Buford's unit. So Buford leads his men to fight on foot. After the attack, Buford lets General Reynolds know about the attacks. Buford prays that Reynolds will come to Gettysburg before it doesn't matter any longer. Buford orders for cannons to be fired and directs the battle in which they are outnumbered. When Buford starts losing hope, General Reynolds appears with his needed militia, but Reynolds is shot and killed shortly after he arrives. The battle continues without a commander to give directions. Buford goes to Scout Hills, making sure that other Confederates are coming in. Lee arrives in Gettysburg, where there's a small but full-fledged battle occurring. He's still annoyed because he hasn't gotten information from Stuart, who is supposed to report on the Union's movement. General Heth and his troops are battling the Union, but then Heth comes to Lee and fills Lee in on what's been going on. Lee thinks that everything that has happened seems to be planned and tells Heth to attack again, as well as General Pender's unit. The battle rampages. Heth has been wounded, and the Union is fighting back better than anyone ever remembers. The Union is finally forced back by the Confederates, and Lee tells General Ewell to follow the Union. Colonel Chamberlain marches his unit to Gettysburg, and he daydreams, realizing that he likes his life as a soldier, romanticizing it until he remembers when he had to pile corpses to keep from getting shot. He thinks to himself that anyone could die at a moment's notice and wonders if he's been trained to love that too. He reflects on his childhood as they march through a town called Hangover. The people there are relieved to see the Union units. The soldiers are told of the battle in Gettysburg, so they set up a camp near there. Longstreet is riding absently near the battlefield and knows that Lee is going to attack the next day, but Longstreet thinks that Lee would be making a mistake. Longstreet becomes depressed, comprehending that all he has left is the army. Fremantle wanders next to Longstreet, giddily, about the fighting he saw that day. He hopes that the Confederacy could become allies with the English one day. Longstreet also thinks a new way of brawling should be used by taking advantage of new weaponry, but Longstreet also thinks that Lee would rather lose the war than his dignity. Lee calls Ewell, Early, and Rhodes, and they convene to talk about why task requests weren't fulfilled. The generals say that it wasn't possible. Lee is annoyed, but asks if General Ewell could attack the Union tomorrow. They debate and strategize. After, Lee meets up with General Trimble, who's angry at Ewell. Afterwards, Lee goes to his base and has Ewell come to him. Ewell apologizes to Lee and thinks that he should attack the way that Lee told him to. Lee accepts the apology and drifts to sleep, wondering where Stuart is. Back at the Union camp, Buford goes into a farmhouse where officers are bickering about who's really in command. Buford informs the men about Reynolds' death, and General Meade arrives, so Buford leaves. At the Confederate camp, Fremantle wakes, excited to watch another battle, wanting another victory for the Confederate. He climbs a tree at Gettysburg to see the whole scene in front of him. Lee and Longstreet meet up, laughing at Fremantle in the tree, so he comes down. He's overall in bliss about the hard nature of the war, thinking that the South could never lose. Fremantle asks why the Confederates are not troubled about the possibility of a Union attack. Longstreet tells him that Meade would never attack. Fremantle goes to join the other Europeans and rambles on about his own beliefs about America in general. Chamberlain waits for new orders, but is preoccupied thinking about his wife in Maine. Private Kilrain tells Chamberlain that an escaped slave was found. He thanks the Union soldiers somehow, as his wounds are binded and he is fed. The slave can't come with the divisions, though, so he's pointed in the best direction possible. Chamberlain is fascinated by the whole encounter, but also feels a bit of disgust as well. Lee and Longstreet meet, conversing about what attacks will happen that day. Longstreet wants to fight defensively, but comes to realize that Lee already has made plans out for today. The plan is to attack the left of the Union so that their forces are concentrated there. That makes it possible for Ewell and Early to take control of a couple of hills while the Union is distracted. Lee thinks it's a nice plan, but wants Longstreet to like it too. Longstreet won't approve of it, but also doesn't bicker. Officers are made on what to do, but agreement doesn't seem to come off easy. Officers leave for battle, and Longstreet meets with Captain Johnston, telling him to make sure that their divisions are not noticed by the Union. Johnston doesn't know the roads to the Union position, which could be a problem. As Lee and Longstreet ride together giddily, Longstreet reminds himself that he was once defending the people, but he is now going to attack. The men talk, and Lee tells Longstreet how hard it is for him to order men to their deaths. Captain Johnston comes to Longstreet, telling him that the Union will be able to see them if they march any further. The division is told to march back, which takes away valuable time. A discovery is made. The Union army went to a new place called Little Round Top. Though there will definitely be casualties, they still have to attack, so the battle begins, moving at a fast pace, with harsh consequences. Chamberlain and his troops are told to move when the attacks start coming. The men march forward, getting close enough for weapon damage to occur. Chamberlain instantly moves his brother to the back of the lines. Chamberlain's men start to build a stone wall to defend themselves and the land that they're on. He orders some men to go left in the case that the Confederates come that way. Enemy forces are on their way, and Chamberlain is at the end of the Union line, but he's not allowed to ever retreat. 2 waves of attacks occur. Bullets get near Chamberlain, but they don't hit him. Chamberlain orders the commanders to hold the line, that they need to stop the Confederates at all and any costs. The next attack is a damaging one. all across the line, but the Union holds, even though they are low on ammunition. A hole in the line appears, so Chamberlain's brother fills it unharmed. There's a temporary hospital set up at the Confederate camp, and Longstreet walks through it. He sees many wounded from the day's attacks, including General Hood, who asks him if they won. Longstreet lies, saying that they won. Some are blaming Longstreet because heaven forbid anyone blame Lee for failing. A report of the heavy casualties came. Within 2 hours, around 8,000 men were wounded, killed, or captured. Longstreet doesn't think that Lee will order another attack because of what happened that day, but Lee tells Longstreet that it was a close battle today, that the Union was so close to retreating. What Longstreet sees as an awful idea is going to happen the next day because Lee will attack. Longstreet is baffled and mad at the lack of strategy that is going to be used tomorrow and decides he'll try to talk to Lee one more time the next morning. Chamberlain notices weaponry being fired towards the north and thinks that they may be attacked on once again, but the men are in a good position to fight. Someone comes and tells Chamberlain that he and his division are being released to rest in a safe place. The aide leads them to this safe place, which is not a safe place at all because it's the center of the line. Longstreet is preparing for the battle that is yet to come. Lee comes to Longstreet as they ride out. Longstreet tries to convince Lee to move south one more time, saying that this frontal attack will be an absolute and complete disaster. Lee is so sure that the Union lines will crumble and won't listen to any other alternatives. Longstreet hears artillery coming from the north, meaning that Ewell has attacked without the orders to do so yet. But apparently the Union has assaulted Ewell while he was preparing. Lee keeps dismissing Longstreet's concerns and says that they need to charge the center of the Union. Longstreet knows that there's no one else who can lead to the attack, but also knows it will lead to failure. So Longstreet is in complete and utter hopelessness. He makes commands nonetheless and knows that now all he can do is watch this all go into flames. Chamberlain is told that Meade wanted to retreat but couldn't, knowing that the Confederates would once again attack them. Chamberlain places his division, then meets with General Skies. He then joins his brother, who tells him that Kilrain has died. Then ammunition is shot from the Confederates, making the world around Chamberlain burst. Chamberlain realizes that an assault is coming and should probably meet up with his unit, but instead he falls asleep because the amount of blood he lost and his exhaustion overcoming him. General Armistead watches the gunfire and sees General Pickett writing a note to his girlfriend. He wanders the lines feeling gray. He knows that he is going to die, so he gives his wedding band to Armistead, telling him to give it to his girlfriend. Armistead sees Garnett on a horse, making him an easy target, but Garnett is riding nonetheless, knowing that he'll die. Soon the Union's weaponry is flying about, weakening the Confederate lines, but they are always filled up right away. Armistead sees Garnett's horse, but not Garnett. Chaos erupts, screaming all around, and the Confederates are leaving, except some keep marching. Armistead is shot, but before he dies, he tells a soldier to send his regrets to his friend on the Union lines.